So the principle of humanity is about how to preserve and maintain life and dignity of population affected by armed conflict. And as it's being implemented, of course, it raises a number of questions and challenges. Questions arise about protracted conflict. Humanitarian action has been conceived as if conflict is of a limited duration, that you help people cope with conflict as being a parenthesis to peace. People are being affected by conflict, you help them to cope with minimalist assistance, food, healthcare, some protection from displacement, and so on. Of course, protection from the effect of hostilities, not to be targeted. And then things will sort themselves out politically, and peace will come back. Well, in situation where the conflict becomes protracted, it may last months, years, if not decades, humanitarian assistance appear to be insufficient. Life and dignity is not sufficient to maintain a society, to maintain industry, to maintain development, to maintain a system of rights, rights to education, rights to health, rights to a normal life. And often humanitarian organizations are the only organization who manage to have access to these environments because of the requirements of impartiality and neutrality and independence. So humanitarian organizations, for example, in northern Mali, very few actually have access to these areas because they are highly contested. And the conflict may last years, if not decades, like in Somalia, in the Sudan, where you have conflict that seems to be endless. And in these circumstances, the principle of humanity appears almost as a shackle. As it says, humanitarian organization brings food, brings emergency health care, but what you do with displaced children without education for months and years, where in fact education is increasingly seen as a humanitarian need of a whole generation. But yet, if you enter into this development question, it says, well, humanitarian organization must preserve life and dignity as well as respond to the needs of education or the right to educate, to be educated. So, but who defines the curriculum? How do you describe the situation? And all the issue goes with history, and the narrative about the situation is highly political and highly contested. Humanitarian organizations are very uncomfortable with this notion, as we've seen in Afghanistan, where humanitarian organizations were, brought in to reopen schools and school for girls, where in fact, since the Soviet occupation, access of girls to education was a point of the conflict. And it still is today with some of the mujahideen or the jihadist movement who will reject education seen in the Western sense. And we see that with Boko Haram, which also means a rejection of Western type of education. So it's quite difficult for a humanitarian organization to have a pragmatic understanding of humanity, to say, well, life and dignity may need more than food and health. It may need agricultural support. It may need reunification of families. It may need education. And at the same time to remain neutral in terms of perception, that you're not coming in to open schools and educate children in a way that would go against one of the parties to the conflict, or promote an agenda of a particular actor to the conflict. But if you do education, of course you have to talk about human rights as well. So it's very difficult for organizations to navigate the tension now in protracted conflict. The same with how you deal with local actors. You want to build the capacity and the coping capability of local actors to be able to restore services, public services, health, education, transport, electricity, but often, especially in non-international armed conflict, that is, conflict within the border of a state, restoring public services is in favor of the central state, or it could be in favor of the group that controls that particular region. So it plays into the politics of the conflict by, if you provide assistance to a hospital to be able to restore its services, it may appear as, promoting the control of the particular group or entity or government over that region. And again, life and dignity, as insufficient as it may be, appears a very conservative norm to have access, but yet insufficient to respond to the needs of the people affected by the conflict.